I'd like to thank you so much for joining me here today. This is a huge deal for me. My first video putting out here on the internet. People who know me well know that I much more prefer to be able to talk with people live in the same space and time, but I understand that's not always practical, so I'm stepping out and making this video, and I really appreciate you watching and giving your time to be with me today. So today we're going to talk about something that I'd like to ask all of us to stop doing if we haven't already, and that is putting on a mask. Because this idea of wearing a mask is what prevents us from being the fullness of who we already are. So I want to ask this question, like, who are you beyond the mask? Who are you? And why are you wearing a mask? And what is your mask? And who are you? And what is life like when you step beyond that? So some of you may be really familiar with this kind of topic and subject, and for others, maybe it's your first time exploring it. And I'll talk a little bit about myself. So I know that when I was young, who knows how early it began, probably earlier than I can even imagine. But I know for sure that's when I began to become very accustomed to wearing a mask without realizing it. So for me, the mask was being the perfect person, or giving the right answer, or doing the right thing. And if you notice that phrase of the right, it's very limiting and confining and suffocating, but I didn't know that back then. What I did know is that when I behaved a certain way, or acted a certain way, spoke a certain way, did certain things, that I was rewarded with something that felt really good. And that was called attention and affection and affirmation and acceptance and adoration, all these A's. And that began to be how I knew myself. So I'd be more comfortable wearing this mask that made everybody else feel comfortable around me, but it prevented me from really knowing who I was. There was a disconnect. And so as I grew older, that mask became known as Michanda is the person you can depend upon. She's reliable, she's strong, she's always up. And that's who I was, always up and positive and ready to go. And what people didn't know, because I didn't let them in and I wasn't vulnerable, was that there were times when I was very low. There were times when I was sad and broken. There were times when I was frightened and depressed and frustrated and full of doubt, and no one ever knew. And that's not to say that's my real self. It just means that wearing the mask prevented me from even being able to express those very real emotions that we go through. And so I learned how to stuff my emotions, which is not healthy. I learned how to project this image that I thought other people liked and wanted, and it felt good to a certain extent, except eventually I began to feel numb and disconnected from my real true self. And it required a lot of digging and work to uncover and unveil, unmask the essence of who I really am, apart from this construct. And so I can tell you that the work wasn't necessarily easy. It was painful to really dig through all of that rock of emotion that had become buried in me. But when it all broke open, when I awakened to the truth of who I really am, I discovered there's so much ease and joy and peace and serenity. It is so simple to be me that I missed it early on. It was so simple, I missed it. And so I want you guys to think, everyone at home, and I say you guys, I'm from Ohio originally, and I remember I'm living in other parts of the country. I was corrected for saying you guys, but just so you know, it's colloquial back where I'm from in Ohio, even though I no longer live in Ohio. But I want to know, what is it that keeps you wearing the mask? for me, it was this tremendous fear of being so exposed and vulnerable. And what if I am rejected? What if people don't like me? And so this what if began to spiral, so much so that it would keep me safer, so I thought, remaining in this box called who everybody knows me as ... And the truth is that when I really began to become acquainted first with the real me, I realized, wow, there is so much falsehood I had surrounded myself with, and the fear of losing that prolonged me wearing the mask, which is so contrary and so absurd to think that I chose to stay in this constricted place, this confined place, all for the fear of losing out on what I thought I had. And so it's this fear of losing something that most often keeps us wearing it. We think that we're safer, we think that it's more comfortable, we think it's more familiar, and we think that we'll lose our relationships and our so-called standing if we let go of this false construct. But can I tell you, it is so freeing to let it go. It is so freeing to speak from an authentic place. And can I tell you what else? And this goes back to a paraphrasing of Marianne Williamson's quote, is that it liberates everyone else around you when we're freely who we are, when we let ourselves shine. And so that's what I discovered when I started becoming familiar and at ease, because it brings such ease to be who I am. I noticed what else? Other people began to be more at ease around me. And so it spreads in a very positive, contagious way, as opposed to this cookie cutter facade that we buy into, that we need to be just like everyone else or we're going to lose out on something. What we lose out on is this beautiful wealth of who we are, which is always more than enough. So I want you to think about, what is it that you're really scared of losing? Who are you scared of losing that keeps you wearing this mask? And begin to notice the difference between when I'm wearing it and when I'm not. So what I began to realize is something as simple as when people ask you, how are you? Do I answer back in that autopilot, robotic sense of, I'm fine, how about you? Or do I slow it down and maybe take a breath and say, today I'm feeling tremendous gratitude just because. And when you answer in this more connected, present, authentic way, you'll watch other people like, ooh, do a double take, because now you just pull them out of their autopilot mode. And beyond all of that, what it does is begin to create a separation in a good way between what is false and what is real, so you can see it and notice it. And the first step is notice, and I say notice with gentleness, not with judgment, because we were given this commodity, this culture that says you need to be a certain way to earn rewards, to earn acceptance, to feel like you fit in. And that's a real part of this life that we live, until we discover that there is so much more, and it's so simple, and there's so much joy and flow when we step into that.